is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. This evening, I'm joined all the way from South Africa by a gentleman called Gérard de Villiers, who is joining us from Kleinood. How are you today, sir?
I'm very well indeed, Jamie. Thank you very much for asking.
Well, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution. For those people unfamiliar with your estate, please tell us a little bit about the fascinating history behind it.
Kleinood is a smallish farm in South African terms, in just on the edge of the village of Stellenbosch. Stellenbosch is considered to be the center of the red wine producing area, top area in South Africa, about 50 kilometers to the east of Cape Town. And my wife and I bought this property about 25 years ago. We were in a very fortunate position that there were no plantings at all on the farm, and we could actually plant what we wished to. So that's always attractive. You often end up paying more often than not too much money for the piece of land. Yeah. And there's maybe a block of Sauvignon Blanc there, which you just bought, wrong cultivar in the wrong position, but then it's tough to take them out.
Now, you have about 12 hectares of land under vine on the property.
That's right. At the time, we set up a couple of weather stations, and I'm not a farmer at all, I'm an engineer. And at least I understood that part of the business, and I could pick up microclimates and daylight, sun hours, and wind speed and humidity, etc., etc. And we prepared a vast amount of graphs, did a lot of soils testing, and compared that information with other wine producing areas around the world. You know, one of the problems, if you do make a mistake and you plant the wrong cultivar in the wrong position, it's going to take you 5, 6, 7 years to figure out you've made a mistake. So I realized I had to get it right, or as close to right as possible. And we ended up looking at our graphs and our information, comparing it, and we saw there was that it was very similar to the Northern Rhone, and we ended up planting Rhone cultivars, primarily Shiraz, Viognier, Roussanne, Mourvèdre, and originally the plan was to make only one wine, Tamboerskloof, which is the name of the brand, Tamboerskloof Syrah, which was going to have some Mourvèdre and some Viognier co-fermented with a Shiraz. But after a while, we ended up realizing there's a bit too much Viognier in the blend, and we ended up making a Viognier. After a while, we realized we were looking for a bit more, so we planted a few rows of Roussanne, and we now make a Viognier Roussanne blend together with the Tamboerskloof Syrah, which still has a spot of Viognier and a bit of Mourvèdre as well. And since then, we've been playing around. We've got an area where we found the grapes ripen a bit slower, and we ended up making a rosé from that out of Syrah. And subsequently, we also found one spot on the farm that gives us our premium fruit, and we started making a John Spicer Syrah, which is this sort of the premium wine from the estate.
Lovely. And what kind of quantities are we talking about here? Because it's an artisanal production.
Artisanal production. So we've got actually 10 hectares of vineyards, 2 hectares of olives.
Right.
Make some olive oil as well.
Okay.
And of the 10 hectares, I would say about 8.5 is Syrah, 5 different clones. At the time in South Africa under apartheid, we couldn't import clonal material that we wanted. There were 3 or 4 clones, South African, Argentinian, Australian, that we had in the country, and everybody ended up planting those. I was fortunate. I bought the land in the New Democracy, and I was able to import some French Shiraz clones. So we've got 5 different clones planted on 2 different rootstocks in different row directions and different plant spacings and so on, all of which was designed around the microclimate that we have on the little property. Production-wise, you talk 12 bottle cases. Total is about 4,000
Right.
12 bottle cases. That's the total production.
So yeah, that's a nice little farm to keep running over there. Now, here's a question for you: why was this particular plot never planted to grapes previously?
Quite interestingly, it was this valley, the Blauwklippen Valley. Blauw is a blue rock valley.
Right.
Dutch word. Blauwklippen Valley. It's got two rivers running down the valley. The two rivers come together on our property, and it's between the Helderberg and the Stellenbosch mountain. And the whole valley belonged to one family for 3 generations. The old clogs to clogs story, the first generation came in clogs, developed, made some money. The second generation made much more. And the third generation lost most of it and ended up in clogs again. And they were primarily fruit farmers.
Right.
Very good fruit farmers at the time. And slowly, as things became a bit tougher, they lost some of the fruit trees. And I was fortunate enough to buy one of the last pieces from one of the siblings.
And do you have many neighbors who are doing similar projects to yourself?
Absolutely. All of the farms in the Blauwklippen Valley are primarily wine producers. Neighbors that I have up at the top is the Trafford, David Trafford up at the top, Keermond, Waterford, Stellenbosch. So we high up in the valley in a little group of wine farmers, of which we are probably the smallest.
Okay, now we're currently in the middle of this unfortunately ongoing pandemic, which has hit us all for 6 all over the world. I've spoken with winemakers, vignerons, brewers, restaurateurs the world over, and everybody's still not quite sure what's going on. How has the pandemic impacted things for you personally and for you as a winery?
Jamie, look, it impacted us to a huge extent.
Yeah.
Before in 2019, we exported about 40% of our production and sold 60% locally in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Of that 60%, 70% was sold to restaurants.
Yes.
So 40% plus of our production went to South African restaurants. Came March 2020, our government, we went into lockdown, and our government took it much further than was the case in most other countries. And they said we were not allowed to transport or sell wine locally, which was a total disaster. So 42% of my market closed overnight. Well, actually 60%, the South African contingent.
Right.
42% restaurants still haven't picked up. So I had to make a plan very quickly. And actually, the overseas market was unbelievably good to me. A guy like Charles Baker up in Ontario
he's a good
phoned me and said, look, what can we do to help? And he was one of many. Even the toughest German importer who really nailed me on our prices would phone and say, look, man, just keep your stuff. Send me a few pallets. We'll pay you up front, or just keep it for me. And it was just actually amazing how everybody gathered around us. And at the moment, we're exporting 65% plus. The restaurants are opening slowly. I was in Johannesburg a couple of weeks ago, and there's a lot of energy and a lot of restaurants opening again. So that was very exciting. And so we're holding thumbs. We're down in the dip at the moment. Everybody's very comfortable, but we're watching Europe. We sort of 2 months behind. So I'm expecting some problems in a couple of months' time.
I think that's where everybody's at right now. We're definitely in the same situation in Ontario. and just, crossing our fingers that we keep on the kind of reasonably good path. Where are things with regards to vaccination rates in South Africa?
I'm under correction. I think we sort of 30% vaccinated,
Okay.
35, so very low. We struggled to get vaccination material. We waited a long time until we could start. And it started quite quickly, and it slowed down a bit now. So it's worrisome.
So that's not to do with vaccine resistance. It's more to do with just simply not having the vaccine available.
I think a combination of both. I think at the moment our vaccine availability has improved a lot, but there's a fair amount of resistance, which we hope we don't. I'm watching Europe, and I've traveled to France a couple of weeks ago, and it was interesting how strong you had to have your pass sanitaire, and you had to be vaccinated. You want to buy a cappuccino at the sidewalk, you were tested. You were checked that you were vaccinated, and they were very rigid about that. You go to the Louvre, you've got to show your QR code, and we're not there yet. So I really hope that it will come quickly, and I think that'll start a groundswell.
I always like to leave all of these interviews on a kind of high note, because quite often we're talking about darker subject matter. What would you say the most valuable thing is that you have learned, Gérard, throughout the last 18 months of the pandemic?
I think, I think that what surprised me most, and what really was a highlight to me, was the support from everyone. To have a guy from Canada saying, "Look, man, how can we help?" So, well, it'll be great if you can buy a couple of pallets.
Yes.
And that happened from everywhere. From even now, we've just had our first export to China, and this comes up in the discussion. We talk prices, and you go through all the motions, and payment terms and all the business stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a feel-good feeling that there's support for the wine industry. And first question is often, how many people work for you? What is their situation? Have you had to let some people go? And I'm very proud to be able to say, no, everybody got their salaries, everybody got their bonuses through the pandemic. And that was mainly through the goodwill of our clients and buyers.
Well, that's a fantastic thing to hear. Gérard, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. Really appreciate your time. I know it's getting on in the evening for you. So take care, and hopefully we can catch up again, perhaps if you make it to Toronto somewhere in the not too far distant future.
There's a trip in the offing, so I'm looking forward to that, and who knows. Thanks a lot, Jamie.
Excellent. We can share a glass of wine then. Take care.
All the best. Ciao.